Welcome back to another episode of Sal and Pals Go to the Movies. I'm here with my friend Touly. Say hi, Touly.
Hi, guys.
And today we're going to be reviewing Black Widow. And just a fair warning, there's going to be spoilers up ahead, so you've been warned. Natasha Romanoff, aka Black Widow, confronts the darker parts of her ledger when a dangerous conspiracy with ties to her past arise. My first pro is the cast. We have Scarlett Johansson, aka Black Widow, but we also have new people that are not so new to us. First off, we're going to go with David Harbour, who is Alexis. Everybody knows him from Stranger Things. We have Rachel Weisz, who plays Melina. We have Florence Pugh, who plays the younger sister of Black Widow. Yelena, people who listen to our podcast might remember Florence Pugh from Midsommar that we reviewed. And I really like this cast because it's really strong, and at the same time, I'm a fan of Florence and her acting. But also, my next point is I really like how they tied this movie in, or they kind of referenced or alluded to what happened in Budapest. It kind of hinted because they always walked around this incident, but they never really told us what it was. Now we see when Florence is in the apartment, she says, "What kind of bullets do that?" And Black Widow responds, "Not bullets, arrows." So we pinpointed that Black Widow and Hawkeye were there at the same time, and they also had to do a mission, but they got into a little battle to survive, and I guess they were on the run for a week or so in Budapest. Next pro is the locations they filmed at. They were eye-pleasing, especially the snow scene, especially because the white part of the snow kind of made you really focus on what was happening in the jail scenes. Every time you saw that, your eye focused on the people on the ground, and you kind of paid attention to the movements and stuff like that. Other locations we saw was around the world, and they actually did say where they were going to: Morocco, Budapest, and stuff like that. So location wise, I really liked how they presented this, especially the chase scenes. It reminded me of scenes like Mission Impossible or Gemini Man. Things like that really kind of made the movie for me because it had action at the same time that we actually started diving into Natasha's past, and it basically set up this part of her life that we had missing between Civil War and Infinity War. Next pro is that they actually touched upon the Red Room story, which I was really hoping they would do this. And if they weren't, we always had the other movie, Red Sparrow, with Jennifer Lawrence, which I would say was the unofficial Black Widow origin story, but now we have an actual one. And by the way, Red Sparrow, not that good, but it still kind of gave us a little hint of what a Red Room would be. And I was really interested that the story would come up since the reboot of the Marvel Universe in the comics, when they started off with the Black Widow series all over again, and they touched upon her training as a child. It's a story that is not only serious, but it's psychological, and her training, what she had to endure. My next pro is the ending credit. We had somebody come in at the end. This is after Endgame, when Black Widow is officially dead. We have her sister come to her grave, and somebody pops up, Valentina. And if you've been catching up with the Disney series, she came out in the Winter Soldier and Falcon series before, and that was not supposed to happen. She was supposed to come out in the movie first and then in the TV series, but due to the pandemic, it got switched around. This gives us hopefully a new person to follow. Since Black Widow is no longer alive, we can follow Pug when she goes up against Hawkeye in the Hawkeye movie. So now moving on to my cons. This movie, at the beginning, I thought it was going to be a serious movie, but then we started getting this little, how can I say this? It seemed like it wanted to be a Deadpool movie by Florence Pugh trying to break the fourth wall with the joke about Black Widow always posing, all the Avengers trying to be cool and act like people were watching them all the time. So that was kind of breaking the fourth wall and making jokes, but at the same time, like, this movie was supposed to be a serious movie. It's not that I have anything against it, it's just that it kind of tried to take two genres and put them together. And like I said, only Deadpool movies can pull this off properly in my book. So this movie couldn't do it, and it just felt out of place sometimes. I did giggle, but then all of a sudden, like, when they try to make jokes and everything, I'm like, okay, either this movie is going to be a serious movie about Red Room and destruction of the Red Room, or you're going to try to put humor into it. My next con is going to be the idea that Black Widow couldn't hurt the bad guy because of the pheromones he was giving off. And at the end, Pug, who should have had the same thing, she was able to climb onto the helicopter and basically try to cause harm to him, which to me, wouldn't it basically prevent her from doing it, even though she wasn't really next to him? But just the idea that she was going to hurt him, wouldn't it have caused something for her to stop doing it? Or is this something that, as long as you're not directly causing harm to him physically, you can plan something to harm him? So to me, that didn't get explained, and I wish they would have done it differently. But overall, I guess they took a different route, and that was it. My next con is when Black Widow, at the end, she rides up on a motorcycle to meet her contact, and then she tells him, "What did you get me?" And all of a sudden, he points to the open field right in front of them with a jet. Her riding in on a motorcycle right there, she couldn't can see the jet on her left side on the big open field. I mean, I was like, wait, you just rode up and we just saw you and it's an open field and you see a big jet there and you don't put one and one together. I'm like, okay. I mean, it was fine, but at the same time, it was just like logic, I would say. It's like right there and she still questions what he got her. So there's a few cons here and there. My biggest one was basically how they wanted to put a little bit of comedy into it. And I guess the pacing was okay. I mean, I didn't have issues with it other than what I mentioned. So I guess with that, I'm going to pass it on to my friend Touly and see how he saw this movie and what grade he gave the movie.
I do share some of the same feelings as Sal does about the film. Let's start out with some of the positives here. I did appreciate some of the action scenes that took place in the movie. Sal already mentioned a couple, but for me, one of the ones that stood out was the falling from the sky scene between Black Widow and Taskmaster. Albeit it was short-lived because they were falling from the sky, but you know how they were crashing into parts from the collapsed Red Room facility. I thought that sequence was pretty cool and very intense. And I will also say, although it will lead into a con in a bit, but the first encounter that Black Widow had with Taskmaster and how we saw some of the abilities that Taskmaster was using, and if you weren't familiar with Taskmaster before watching this film, it might have seemed a little confusing, but I guess maybe slowly as that fight went on the bridge, you kind of get a sense as to what Taskmaster can do. Maybe not tie in, why some of the things he did look so familiar. I like some of the stuff that was done in that fight to pay homage to some of the characters that we are familiar with from the Marvel Universe. I mean, obviously, the shield, when Taskmaster was using it, should have reminded people of, Captain America. You also saw him do like a web swing, which, of course, pay homage to Spider-Man. So, yeah, that first encounter, I thought, did a good job at introducing us to what Taskmaster can do. And for someone who isn't really too familiar with Taskmaster in his history, I am at least familiar with, his capabilities to a degree, and seeing that first fight sort of go the way it did, I liked. Although I will talk about some of the cons I had with Taskmaster in a bit, but trying to stick to the positives first. That little montage at the beginning after the sisters got taken away to become Black Widows, I thought that was fine because we didn't need to focus too much on what happened in between when they were still young girls to their now adult and Black Widowed form. So seeing that little montage being played did his job. In terms of Yelena, I am okay with her character. I feel like maybe they were forcing some of her lines in terms of like the comedic relief, or maybe as Sal pointed earlier, at least to me too, maybe it felt overdone to a point where maybe some of these things could have just been serious lines or not said at all. I don't know if that's like a way that they wanted to approach this character so that we as an audience can relate to her, in that she's the opposite of Natasha, where Natasha is more about being serious most of the time. Yelena, her true self, that is, she can be serious, but she does have this amusing side to her as well. So maybe they did that to contrast Natasha and Yelena's character, but maybe at the same time trying to get us to relate and be on board with Yelena, since she's gonna be a part of the Marvel Universe going forward, especially given that post-ending credit scene that Sal talked about. The pacing was alright. The movie was a little over 2 hours long. If I were to be nitpicky, I might have either, cut some lines here and there. I'm trying to think of like a scene that maybe they could have done without, but at the top of my head, I can't think of anything. But maybe it was the lines that were being delivered, not necessarily the scenes and the sort of relevance that each of these scenes have. But I think, like I said, some of the jokes became very overburdened because it just kept on happening over and over when I'm expecting a more serious moment. But now that I think about it, the one thing that I would have liked to be improved upon is the scene where Natasha and Milena were talking about how they were going to infiltrate the Red Room and some of the quirks that Dreykov had in place to protect himself. It went back and forth, I know, at least 2 times. It didn't flow well into what was happening currently because they needed to take a back step and explain this is actually Natasha with Dreykov and Milena is actually next to Red Guardian in their cells. I could have done with one of those sort of mini flashbacks to get a sense as to why things just happened in front of me. But then later, it's explained again to Natasha from Melina that, oh, Dreykov has these pheromones on him, and if you so breathe them, and then he kind of has this control over you. To me, I felt like it was a little too much like a narrative exposition. They could have just alluded to the fact that they were going to do something, that they had a plan. Like before they maybe cut back to the scene between Alexei and Yelena talking in the room, you know, that little bonding moment that Natasha had with Melina holding onto that book that she preserved, you know, after she telling Natasha that, oh, she spilled the beans and, you know, Dreykov's men are coming for them. Maybe she could have just easily said, you know what, I want to help you. I might have a plan. You know, just do something like that. And if you want to do one mini flashback to kind of give us a sense of what you guys were talking about, then I think that would have been better. But I think it went back and forth one too many times for my taste. But other than that, the only other thing I would say was a big con was actually Taskmaster. As I mentioned earlier, I did enjoy that first encounter with Taskmaster. It was like, oh, okay, let's see if Taskmaster can really sort of pull off some of the things that I expect him to pull off, which is to mimic some of the abilities that our favorite Marvel superheroes can do. And sure enough, yeah, they were able to show some of that in the first encounter. But then we get that, as Sal mentioned, Mission Impossible sort of Jason Bourne sort of chase throughout the city. And I felt like that took away screen time for Taskmaster to really elevate his abilities. I mean, we do still see a couple of the things that he mimicked, such as Hawkeye's arrow shot to the car, and again, throwing a shield like Captain America. But I wanted to see more Taskmaster because it felt like, as much as Dreykov was the main villain of this film, I think Taskmaster being the face of, you know, these encounters with Natasha and Yelena, I felt like Taskmaster should have been more relevant in that. And I personally felt like the way to have done this is to really showcase what his characters can do. You know, again, the sort of abilities he can mimic. I wanted to see more of that versus, oh, here's just a car chase and a couple of rather simplified versions of these abilities. I wanted to really see, you know, the potential of this character, which sort of ties into the scene when Taskmaster was gonna fight against Red Guardian, when he pulled out Black Panther's claws. And I was like, oh, okay, I like where this is going. And then they immediately cut to a different scene. And I was so disappointed when that happened because I wanted to see that fight right then and there. Taskmaster pulled out Black Panther's claws and I'm going to see how this goes. But it was like they were trying to not show Taskmaster, but at the same time wanted to show Taskmaster when there were interactions with Natasha. They wanted to either save Taskmaster maybe for a next film and not do too much with Taskmaster in this film other than the character who was actually Taskmaster, which I guess to go back to maybe a positive, I did like the twist. If you weren't familiar with Dreykov's daughter, that she was Taskmaster, and that sort of tied into Natasha's sort of dark history and how she was like collateral damage, as she put it, when she was trying to go after Dreykov. I did like that twist because the movie was setting us up for that, and when the big reveal happened, it's like, okay, I see where they're going with this, and it works for me. But I just wanted to see the potential of Taskmaster a whole lot more than what they did with this film. And one last thing about Taskmaster before I move on, which sort of became a con for me in the way they were telling the story, because there were big twists later, again, spoiler alert, is that Taskmaster is the daughter of Dreykov, who we thought got killed as collateral damage when Natasha went after Dreykov. So when it was revealed towards the end of the film that Taskmaster was the daughter, that was the payoff. But by doing it in the way they did, they could have still probably done it, but, you know, they didn't have Taskmaster talk. And the problem with that, at least for me, is that although I am not familiar with Taskmaster's origin from the comic books and whatnot, I am familiar enough with that character to know that the character is able to talk. And yes, you could sort of tie the inability to talk to Dreykov and maybe Dreykov giving Taskmaster the order to not speak, but by not having him speak, you sort of lose that personality. For this movie to have depicted Taskmaster in such a light, it did give Taskmaster this sort of mysterious aura where it's like, who is this person, right? But at the same time, you lose this other side to the character that you could have been developing throughout the movie if you allowed the character to speak. And maybe one way they could have done this is do what maybe DC does with Batman, where the voice is altered in some way to the point where you don't recognize that Taskmaster is actually a female, but at least you hear something from this individual. And again, from my little knowledge of Taskmaster, I think Taskmaster has a very strong personality and at times is rather rather comedic as well. So, like I said, you do miss out on that opportunity by how they told the story in this film that revolves Taskmaster, but maybe they'll make this side of Taskmaster more apparent in the next film. As far as the post-credit ending scene goes, this was wishful thinking on my part, but when Yolanda whistled, I was waiting for a second whistle to be heard. Again, wishful thinking, it didn't happen, and like Sal said, you get a potential setup between Yolanda and Hawkeye, and I can kind of already guess where they're going to do this. They're going to have some conflict throughout the film, and then eventually team up to do whatever it is that they're going to do against the main bad guy of that film. But we'll see where they take that. Again, coming from Yolanda's perspective, she doesn't know what really happened to Natasha, so somebody popping out of the blue like that and saying, here is the person who killed your sister, seems to be good enough proof or motivation for Yolanda to potentially go after Hawkeye. But we actually know what happened between Hawkeye and Black Widow, in that Black Widow chose to sacrifice herself in order to get one of the Infinity Stones. We'll see what they take that movie, but I do appreciate the build up. So score wise, I'm gonna give Black Widow a 7 out of 10. It was good. Like I said, some of the comedy relief could have been done without, because I felt it was a little overburdening at times. Again, the whole setup to the Red Room maybe could have been handled in such a way where it would have been a little more mysterious and not so direct. And Taskmaster, although a great introductory battle on the bridge, I would have liked to see more potential from Taskmaster. But like I said, so maybe they're just saving Taskmaster up for future movies and don't want to give away too much of what she can do. It does leave the mind to wonder what Taskmaster can really mimic, and given some of the things that they have shown in this movie, I'm expecting a whole lot of great things from this character, because I am very fascinated by, again, just the potential of this particular individual.
So I agree with you and all your points, especially the Taskmaster part. I really wanted to see them go the route of martial arts movies where they do one style versus another. It's like almost paper, rock, scissors kind of thing. So Taskmaster pulls out the Black Panther moves, then Natasha does another move to counter it, then Taskmaster does Spider-Man, and then Natasha does something else. So I wanted to see that, and at the same time, that would pay tribute to, like Touly said, to the characters who have fallen, who we might not get to see again. But in Taskmaster, we get all of them in one. So I would wanted to see that like in a one-on-one fight, instead of just breaking it up, like Touly said, into different mini battles. I want it to be one battle where they're like fighting and just combating each other, and then pulling out the styles. I'll call them styles. You know, each character has his different style. That's one of the points that I wanted to make. And I guess my grade is going to be the same as Touly, a 7 out of 10, mostly because it went between comedy and a serious movie. That's why it got lower grade from me. If they would have basically stuck to one or the other, it would have probably received a higher grade from me. So I guess that does it for this review of Black Widow. Please join us next time where we're going to review Snake Eyes.
They can't change your past, but they can offer you a purpose.
Please like, comment, and subscribe. You can find our social media links below. And like always, keep watching movies. Always keep watching movies. Always keep watching